بالعالمين اللهم صل على محمد النبي الأمي وعلى آله وسلم تسليما. So again we want to speak about some of the A'lam Al-Nubala. The A'lam Al-Nubala, when you hear that word, you should just remember we are speaking about the flag bearers of Islam, the persons, mashallah, who had done a lot of khidmat for this deen. There were a few personalities that we mentioned. We would revert to them inshallah ta'ala. For example, Fudail bin Ayad, Ibrahim bin Adham, Omar bin Abdul Aziz. Just to name a few of whom we had mentioned previously. Today we want to speak about Muhammad bin Sirin. Muhammad bin Sirin, one of the Tabi'in. So let's speak about him inshallah ta'ala. So Muhammad bin Sirin, rahimahullah ta'ala, as you all would have known, he was the great alim who was the expert in interpretation of dreams. So he was the expert in the interpretation of dreams, and there are many stories about him. So let's just mention a little bit about his history, and then we'll fast forward to speak about his ilm. So Muhammad bin Sirin was called Al-Imam. Again, a person to be called Al-Imam in these books, it means a lot. It means that his ilm and his knowledge was to such an extent that he was a leader of the Ummah. Shaykh al-Islam. He was Shaykh al-Islam, meaning that even the governors and even the Muslim politicians, the Khulafa, would recognize him as an alim of the state. His name was Abu Bakr al-Ansari al-Anasi al-Basri. He was the Mawla and he was a freed slave of Anas bin Malik. Anas bin Malik, the Qadim of the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. His father was from the prisoners of Jarajaya. So one of the battles, Jarajaya, was a place or a city in Iraq, close to Baghdad, and his father was from those prisoners. So Anas bin Malik rahimahullah ta'ala or radiyallahu anhu owned him, and Anas bin Malik radiyallahu anhu, he made an agreement with Muhammad bin Sirin to pay off or pay for his freedom, which is, and he became a mukhatib. Mukhatib is that slave who makes an agreement with his master that I would pay you such and such money and I would win my freedom. So he became a mukhatib and he was freed. Of course, by being in the company of Anas bin Malik radiyallahu anhu, he would have learned a lot of the deen of Allah. He learned Islam also from Abu Hurairah, Imran bin Hussein, Ibn Abbas, Uday bin Hatim, Ibn Umar, and so many others. And amongst his students was Qatada, Ayub, Yunus bin Ubaid, Ibn Aun, Khalid al-Hadda, Hisham bin Hassan, Auf al-Arabi, Qurat ibn Khalid, and so many others, mashallah. We will not go into the details of naming all of his students. Let's describe him. Yusuf bin Atiyah says, Ra'aytu ibn Sirin, I saw Ibn Sirin, I met him, and he was qasiran, a bit short, adim al-batan, with a large stomach, lahu wafratun yufariqu sha'ruhu, and he would part his hair. So his hair was long and he would have them in parts. He was always smiling, and he would dye his beard with henna. So this was a physical description of Ibn Sirin. Aun says that Ma ra'aytu mithla Muhammad bin Sirin, I have never met anyone, I have never saw anyone similar to Muhammad bin Sirin. Such a character he was, and such a great alim he was. Uthman al-Batti says, Lam yakun bil Basra, there was no one in Basra, A'lam bil Qada min Ibn Sirin, who had more knowledge of Qada. What is Qada? Qada is the ability to judge between people. So he was a great faqih. He understood the laws of Qada, and he understood how to be a Mufti of the Ummah. Ash-Sha'bi says, or Sha'bi used to tell his students, Alaykum bi dhalik al-asam, ya'an ibn Sirin. Ash-Sha'bi would advise his students, be in the company of that quiet person, meaning Ibn Sirin, be in his company. So this was a part of his character. Mubarak al-Ajli says, Ma ra'aytu ahadan afqaha fi wara'ihi. I have never seen anyone who in his piety he has more fiqh. So, just think about it. His knowledge of fiqh led him to become pious. So he would practice so much on his ilm that his ilm and his knowledge was the purpose or was the reason for him to become pious, for him to become a friend of Allah. So I've never seen anyone who has more fiqh in his piety than Muhammad bin Sirin. Wala awra'a fi fiqhi Muhammad bin Sirin. So in his fiqh there was piety, and in his piety there was fiqh. So there are some people, they are just pious because it's their character, but they might not have great knowledge. But Muhammad bin Sirin was such a person that his fiqh, there was a lot of taqwa and piety in his fiqh, in his knowledge of deen. And then in his piety, you would also be able to learn fiqh from studying his piety. So it was a, mashallah, very unique way of expressing his ilm, his knowledge. His character itself, his character itself would radiate knowledge, mashallah. Ibn Aun says, Thalathatun lam tara aynaya mithlahum. There are three persons my eyes have never seen like them. Ibn Sirin bil Iraq. Ibn Sirin in Iraq. Qasim bin Muhammad in Hijaz. Is Qasim bin Muhammad bin Abi Bakr. We will have to speak about him, inshallah. So Ibn Sirin in Iraq, I've never seen anyone like him. Qasim bin Muhammad bin Abi Bakr in Hijaz in the Arabian Peninsula. And Raja bin Haywa in Sham. كأنهم التقوا فتواصوا. It was as if all three of them met and all three of them came together to become the same type of persons. So Ibn Sirin is in Iraq, and a few countries away you would find Qasim bin Muhammad in Hijaz, and a few countries away, a few thousands of miles away, you would find Raja bin Haywa in Sham. Three totally distant areas of the Muslim world, and all three persons, it was as if they had the same character and the same piety with their knowledge and piety together. So, there are some people, when they become knowledgeable, their knowledge doesn't show piety. Sometimes they find reasons to break the rules and the laws of Allah. And sometimes, to find an alim who is actually practicing his ilm, sometimes it's a rare thing. And truth be told, you would find many ulama, subhanallah, they might not make it lazim upon themselves to perform salat in jama'ah or to recite excessive Quran unless they are like teaching something or unless they are listening to their students. But these ulama of the past, subhanallah, they were such people that their ilm became their piety, and their piety became part of their ilm. It's something rare you would find, subhanallah. It's something rare you would find. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us similar to them, inshallah ta'ala. Bismillah. وقال وقف على ابن سيرين دين كثير من أجل زيد كثير أراكه لكونه وجد في بعض الظروف فارة. There was one incident is barely mentioned here, but I would mention a little bit more for you, inshallah, a little bit more details. Muhammad bin Sirin, rahimahullah, of course, even when he was a slave, he would do tijarat. He would do trade, a lot of trade. And part of his trade, besides selling cloth, he would trade in olive oil. We trade in olive oil. And today I'll just mention this incident, and we'll pause for today. Next time we may revert to him inshallah ta'ala, like the others we said we're going to revert to inshallah. So he would trade in olive oil as well as so many other goods, and of course people would trust him. So on one occasion he took a lot of olive oil. You can see in our terms hundreds if not thousands of liters of olive oils in huge barrels, huge wooden barrels. And he stored them up because olive oil is something that's always profitable. In Iraq, in Hijaz, or wherever his marketplace was, people are going to buy a lot of olive oil. So he, mashallah, he almost dominated the marketplace with his olive oil. And he estimated that there's going to be a huge profit. So he took all of this olive oil on credit. And inshallah, when he sells it quickly, he's going to pay off his creditors, inshallah ta'ala. He opened one barrel and he found a dead rat in this one barrel. He opened one barrel of olive oil and he found a dead rat in that one barrel. So he poured that barrel away. And then something entered his mind and he was saying, well, subhanallah, no one saw him. No one saw him. Allah alone saw him. And Allah alone knows that there was a dead rat in that barrel of olive oil. So he could have sold it and no one would have known. But mashallah, his piety led him to pour that whole barrel of olive oil away. Let's pour it away. And of course, that's a loss in his business. One barrel of olive oil. Then it entered his mind, suppose all of this olive oil came from the same source, the same person. And perhaps all of it is contaminated now. So he began to doubt. Now he has no surety that, all of the olive oil was contaminated, but there's a doubt. And he's thinking to himself that how can I sell something to the Muslims in which I myself have a doubt, because I found one rat in one barrel. I would not use the other barrels for myself because there's already a doubt, there's a discomfort in his mind. Subhanallah, every single barrel he opened and he poured every single thing out. Every single bit of his olive oil, subhanallah, hundreds of liters or thousands of liters, he just poured it out. And then the creditors came. So he didn't sell any olive oil, and the creditors came, subhanallah, and they came to demand their money, and he doesn't have the money. He doesn't have any money to repay them, and they now take him to the qadi, and subhanallah, he has nothing to repay. So as a great scholar of deen, as a tabi'i, as a student of Sahaba, and he is greatly respected amongst the people, whether religiously or as a merchant, the qadi has no other choice but to arrest him. And the judgment was that he must remain as a prisoner until some of his assets would be sold and given back to his creditors, or until he finds a way to pay his creditors off, subhanallah. So he was thrown in jail for what? For part of his piety. For being pious, for being righteous, for doing the right thing, even though he could have done otherwise, and he could have hidden the fault of his merchandise with no one knowing except Allah alone. And for doing the right thing, subhanallah, he was thrown in jail, and he didn't speak about it. And he remained in jail until Anas bin Malik radiallahu anhu was on his deathbed, and Anas bin Malik sent a message to Muhammad bin Sirin that I would want him to be the one to lead my janazah, but he was in jail. So the family members of Anas bin Malik, they go to the qadi, they go to the creditor also, and they plead with them, please allow Muhammad bin Sirin to lead the janazah, to wash the body and to shroud and to lead the janazah of Anas bin Malik. So the creditor agreed, the qadi agreed. He was taken out for that small moment of time and allowed that one day. He was allowed that one day to do the janazah of Anas bin Malik, to shroud him, do the janazah, accompany his burial. And then Muhammad bin Sirin, he walked himself back to the jail. the warden of the jail or the guard of the jail saw him coming in and said, "Oh Sheikh, why don't you just take the entire day off? You know, subhanallah. Go see your family because I trust you. You are going to come back, right?" And the guard of the jail is telling him, "You should go and spend today with your family. Go today and spend some time at home, and later on in the evening, then we would put you back in the prison cell." And he refused, subhanallah. He says, "I cannot do it because it will be a means of dhulm and oppression against the creditor. It's going to be a means of oppression against the right of the creditor if I would just take that allowance to see my family and his debt is not yet paid out." So Muhammad bin Sirin walks himself back and sits in his cell, subhanallah. And mashallah, later on, his family found a way to gather enough money to pay off the creditor, and I think also part of the creditors, they forgive him for some of the debts. And mashallah, he set an example for so many of us, you know, doing the right thing, even when no one is looking, only Allah alone is looking. That's one. And also, if we have doubt in something for ourselves, how can we even want that for others? How can we even want that for the Muslims? Subhanallah. So as a great scholar and as a great righteous, pious person, he set a nice example for us that we can follow, inshallah, in practicing our ilm and in practicing fiqh, inshallah ta'ala. So as I said, a few of the key names that we have spoken about, we will revert to them soon, inshallah ta'ala, and we will try to expand on their biographies a little bit. Umar bin Abdul Aziz, Ibrahim bin Adham, Muhammad bin Sirin, and so many names are keep on popping up. We would be able to speak about them a bit, inshallah ta'ala, and later on, inshallah ta'ala. Jazakumullahu khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.